band. The band.
Do you see the light?
The band.
Do you see the light?
What light?
Have you seen the light?
Yes! Yes! Jesus H. Goddamn Christ! I have seen the light!
What's going on, everyone? I'm Kevin.
I'm Jake.
This is Movie Matters. Today we're talking about the Blues Brothers from 1980. Dude, James Brown always looks sweaty as fuck. In every, clip I've ever seen him in, or, in this movie, he's just, his face is just, soaked.
Oh, yeah. He goes hard, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, apparently he actually sung that live in the movie, which is pretty cool. So
yeah, his performance is live, and John Lee Hooker's performance on Maxwell Street was recorded live because they both couldn't lip sync.
I mean, that's just badass, honestly. If you ask me, I don't want to lip sync. I just want to actually sing. That's
just
super
do
cool.
it.
Yeah. So I've seen this movie at least a dozen times, maybe even 20 times. I love this movie.
Yeah.
We've bonded over this movie a lot, just as kids. And obviously we grew up in Chicago, and this is, a love letter to Chicago. It's like, you have to, if you live in Illinois or Chicago, this is a movie you are watching, 100%. And it's crazy because people still have not seen this movie. I asked my boss at work, I'm like, have you seen Blues Brothers? He's like, no, I've never seen it. And this guy, he's in his 40s. I'm like, how the hell have you never seen this movie? This is an absolute dynamite classic movie that everyone should see.
Yeah, it is really surprising how many people haven't seen it, especially because everyone knows the deal with it. But some people just haven't seen the movie. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I mean, I get it in a sense because not everyone's into musicals, and I mean, this isn't. I would categorize this as a musical, but at the same time, it's it's mainly a comedy in my opinion. But I feel like a lot of people, especially with this movie coming out in 1980, and you growing up, everyone knows about this movie, and growing up, it's oh, it's a musical. Not everyone wants to watch a musical, which is kind of disappointing because there's some great musicals out there, Singing in the Rain, like La La Land and stuff like that. But this is this movie is not that type of musical, I guess you could say, but it's so entertaining and so well done. And I haven't watched it in a while. When was the last time you watched this movie?
Probably a year or two.
Okay, so you've seen it somewhat recently. I know it's one of your favorites for sure.
Yeah, I usually watch it at least once a year.
Okay, that's
I
awesome.
love it so much.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, I hadn't seen it in a number of years. Definitely a good number of years, maybe even 5 years. And yeah, it's been a while for me, but I had a whole new appreciation for this movie, watching it now at our age, and us kind of dissecting 80s movies. It's just obviously it's right at 1980, which you kind of consider it an 80s movie, even though it's very 70s vibes. I have a whole new appreciation for this movie, especially with how classic it is and how iconic it is. I didn't realize how iconic it is until watching it this time. It's so iconic. With all the people that are involved, you got James Brown, obviously from that clip. You got Aretha Franklin. You got Ray Charles. That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah, the musical lineup in this movie is absolutely stacked.
Yeah.
Everyone that plays or sings in this movie is an R&B legend. The backup band for the Blues Brothers are all studio musicians from the 60s and 70s that are played on every single legendary blues or R&B record ever made. So it's wild that they assembled this absolutely legendary set of people together
Yeah.
to do a comedy.
Yeah. And the cast in general is awesome. You know,
Yeah.
obviously Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, John Candy, just classic
Carrie
cast. Carrie Fisher, yeah. Like, I forgot she was in this, but like
this is like straight off of Star Wars almost.
Yeah.
Like a few years after, but like
it's all the same people from that
far.
pool. Yeah, like all the same people from the pool. Like John Landis knows Spielberg, who knows Lucas. Like that's all a melting pot of all those, you know, classic 70s movies and getting the team and stuff together. Yeah, Carrie Fisher's character is awesome in this movie. Like she says like she has like no dialogue, but like is just always trying to kill John Belushi Jake. You know, and I loved that. Just shooting rocket launchers at them and like I just love how they're so oblivious to it, and like that just adds to the comedy. Like they get, you know, the rocket launcher shoots at their like hotel or wherever Elwood's staying, and they just get up and like brush their suits off, and then like the doors come off the hinges. Like, so good. I love that scene, and just, you know, the flamethrower with the propane tank and the phone booth launching in there. It's just a classic kind of slapstick comedy.
That's one of the things I wanted to touch on is like this movie hits like every type of comedy. Like there's great visual gags, there's like just classic kind of jokes, there's a bunch of slapstick, and there's like complete like absurdism where like when the Nazi car flies off the highway and it's like dropped from the air from like 20 miles in the sky. They just like went like completely wild with it, and then like it's what makes it, I think, so great. And even the like little moments where like the doors in the orphanage open and close by themselves.
Yeah, kind of like Exorcist style almost. Like, and the main nun levitating backwards to go back into her quarters. So good. I forgot about all this like classic stuff. It was really good to watch it again. So definitely worth a rewatch if whoever's listening, you know, hasn't seen it in a while. Definitely worth a rewatch, or watch it for the first time, of course. Yeah, a lot of cool fun facts, like a lot of cool cameos and casts, like we were talking about, like John Candy as that like corrections officer. He's awesome. I love John Candy. That like he is like my childhood movie dad, if you will. Like he's just amazing. Like I just watched Uncle Buck like literally the other night, and that's one of my all-time favorites. Like he's so good in this movie, and he's got such a small part with his, you know, 70s mustache and his hair. So good.
And he's like a goofball through the whole movie. Like he's the only one that enjoys the antics that like they're being put through. Like all the other cops are just like pissed the whole movie.
And they crash into the side of the truck, and he's like, "What car is this? 55. Oh, we're car 55. We're in a truck." I love that. Love that. Just so awesome. Just little cameos here and there. All like just dynamite cast for sure. Like, great casting. And
you know, looping back to the comedic aspects of this, I think one of the reasons why this movie is so good is it's I think a little bit ahead of its time in terms of how it handles comedy. Because they give you just enough time for jokes to land and for you to laugh, stop laughing, and then they hit you with the next joke. And like we talked about in our night shift episode, like some other contemporaries in like the early 80s were still in that like 60s 70s, like just like assault you with jokes one after the other and not give you time to like process them. And this movie is like probably one of the oldest movies I've seen that actually lets things sit for a minute before
time to breathe,
they continue, you know. I think that makes it like super successful.
Agreed. Yeah. John Landis directed this movie. He's obviously well known from Animal House, which is a really good comedy, slapstick, stuff like that. I was really impressed. Like this time watching it, I really kind of focused on his directing style and everything like that. And like you said, with allowing the jokes to land, excuse me, just with the jokes to land and everything like that, they did a good job. Like the direction was really awesome, and just like how it's shot is really good, and just like the acting is actually surprisingly really good. Like I love, like I was really impressed with this direction.
Yeah, and there's even like little moments where like the actors will do like something kind of weird, but like it really works. Like the one for me is when they're at Bob's Country Bunker and they're talking to Bob's wife, and Jake just starts going like extremely loud and like boisterous.
Like almost like spitting too.
Yeah. Like, well, that's great, Bob. And like but then you hear Bob talk, and Bob talks the same way.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I get it. He's being like a country guy. Like it's just like tiny little things like that add, I think, some like little layers to the performances that are pretty great.
Agreed. It's funny that, obviously, so they're in these suits and glasses the entire movie. And like, I just find that hilarious in and of itself. And like when they go to that restaurant to recruit the fancy pants guy.
Yeah. Mr. Fabulous.
Mr. Fabulous. Thank you. When they were like recruiting him and like, when they're trying to get him, and they're, causing a ruckus at this really fancy restaurant, and the one patron next to them with his family is just like, these guys are offensive. They smell. I love that part, because it's just like, it's so on the nose, and it's great comedy because it's like they're in these suits 24/7,
Right.
Like Jake literally just got out of prison and hasn't dry cleaned or washed the suit and just throws it right on. And like, obviously they're not going to show that in a movie, but it's just like, you just know that they live in it, and it's so great. Like they go to sleep in it too. Like it's just classic. Like they're inside all the time, sunglasses on, like you never see their eyes really. And that adds to the comedy aspect of it.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of those like little details about like their fictional lives that like really give the movie some depth, like in the early part of the movie, they get pulled over, and they have the police have the like whatever that like SCMODs, which is like the state, municipal, county offender database or something.
Yeah.
And when it pulls up Elwood's information, it's like 156 tickets unpaid and like 50 moving violations.
Yeah.
It's like
suspend license immediately.
Arrest driver.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
Yeah. And they just take off. So,
and destroy them all.
Yes. That whole destruction was awesome. And I just love that they're just, it adds to the comedy that just like, oh, Pier 1 Imports. This mall's got everything. Like they're actually walking through it, but they're instead driving through it, causing a muck.
Yeah.
Speaking of destruction, stuff like that, the budget was, it was $27.5 million, which for that time apparently was the most expensive movie ever made, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like that's mind blowing. Like, especially watching it, it's like, you can get that, but you also at the same time, it's just like, it's a pretty like, simple movie, simple premise, minus obviously the car chases and all the cars, getting destroyed. But that's crazy. And like it grossed 115 million, which is a good amount. But it wasn't really considered like a financial success until like later, from what I was looking at and seeing. And it's, it's crazy because there's a lot of factors that played into its box office like success in a sense, but also not its success. Like, for example, like there's a lot of African Americans in this movie, and they they attribute the poor box office in a sense to the American South like not showing the movie because of the amount of African Americans in the movie, which is crazy. I mean, obviously it's a different time back then, but just like if you think about it, this movie is kind of ahead of its time, like you were saying, with, you know, all these African American actors very predominantly in the movie and
Mhm.
having great roles, and, you know, all these amazing musicians getting credit. I love that. I thought that was awesome, but it's crazy that, you know, that didn't help the box office at the time.
Yeah, I think it's funny that they call it unsuccessful when they tripled the budget of the movie, but
Yeah,
at
I
the
know.
box
It's
office.
crazy.
But you know,
Well,
um,
what
but yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I have heard that as well, that it wasn't considered successful.
yeah.
And like I think it's weird to consider that, you know, at being one of the most expensive movies ever made at the time, and being a comedy is like a very risky move, I think,
Yeah,
especially an
definitely.
R-rated comedy, is like not something that was done at that time, like at all. Um, so I think another way that this movie was ahead of its time, um, yeah, along with uh, the representation, I guess, that
Yeah,
was showcased in the movie.
definitely. And also, like, this movie was released the same day Star Wars Empire Strikes Back came out,
Oh, that's
which is
rough.
like, yeah. So that didn't help its chances. But speaking of Star Wars fame, Frank Oz has a cool cameo in this where
Mhm.
Frank Oz plays Yoda, and you can even hear it in his voice. He's one of the corrections officers giving John Belushi Jake's clothes when he's getting out of prison, when he's getting
Mhm.
released. And I thought that's a cool cameo. Steven Spielberg is at the end of the movie,
Yeah,
and I didn't even know that he was in it. I like
yeah, I
completely forgot, and then I
never
remember
noticed.
just watching it the other day and him opening the door to the you know the mayor's office or whatever, and it being Spielberg. I was like, holy crap, that's Spielberg! Like that's awesome. I had no idea, but he was obviously good friends with Landis, which is pretty cool.
Mhm.
Um,
Speaking of cameos, not related to Star Wars, but at the end when they're doing Jailhouse Rock in the prison,
oh
there's a
yeah,
prisoner that jumps up on a table and starts dancing. And that's actually Joe Walsh
yeah, that's
from
super
the
cool.
Eagles. And there's a lot of stories about Joe Walsh and Belushi hanging out in the 80s, and doing absurd amounts of drugs. And one of the one of the stories is that Joe Walsh actually hired a specific bodyguard whenever he went to Chicago, only to keep John Belushi away from him. Because if the Eagles were on tour or something, he was like, I cannot get messed up. You know, like for like the 2 nights that we're here to do a show, it's like he would pay this guy to like keep Belushi away from him so he could play the show and get out of town.
That's so good. Yeah,
Yeah.
apparently there was like an actual budget for cocaine for this movie, which is insane. But according to Dan Aykroyd, like that helped with John Belushi's performance, just with the cocaine and you know intoxication. So that's pretty crazy. I mean, yeah, like him in the clip we just watched with him doing, you know, cartwheels and stuff like that and flips and stuff. Like, I love that. I mean, I'm sure
Mhm.
cocaine helped fuel that,
Yeah.
but yeah, just awesome performances all around. And they were also super young. Like Dan Aykroyd
Mhm.
was only 27 when this came out. Belushi was 30. Like that's crazy. That's younger than us right now. Like that's just crazy to think that.
Yeah, and this was I think the concept was originated by the two of them, because they enjoyed like R&B and blues, and they had actually done at least one performance on Saturday Night Live as the Blues Brothers, as like the musical act.
Yeah,
And like it's like kind of surprising how good both of them are at singing. Because like you
and dancing.
wouldn't expect it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
dancing is ridiculous. But like speaking of the music is so good in this movie. It's
yeah.
so catchy. Like literally after I watched it, I was humming and singing, you know, after I watched it. Just it got stuck in my head. And I remember, watching this movie as a kid, and buying the soundtrack because I was obsessed with it. Sam and Dave in the car and everything like that. The music's so good in this movie. And again, to kind of just categorize it as a musical is funny because again, people kind of think musical is not entertaining or anything like that. It's not as another box office kind of curse, but I think it's so well done in this movie. Like the music is just so good.
Yeah, and I think it helps that there's a mix of like synced performances, like which is like classic musical where you lip sync to like a backing track, and then the live performances I think really give it like some good variation, and like it keeps things like entertaining, I think. Because I think sometimes the backing track, big musical numbers can kind of like, it sucks some of the like realism out of things. And like one of the things that's great about this movie is like, it's a very realistic movie until it isn't at all. And then it just pops back into reality,
Yeah. It's like even just the dancing with the music too is so good. Just like the choreography is great. Like Aretha Franklin,
the shake
like
your tail feather,
your tail feather with Ray Charles is so good. Think with Aretha Franklin. They're all super well done. I love that. Like you said, it being an R-rated comedy. I do. It's one of the first R-rated movies I've ever seen, actually. And just like, it still makes me laugh, just like hearing swear words and everything like that. Like him being like, we got to see the penguin. No fucking way. Like you and I quote that all the time. It's just like, it still makes me laugh. Like, you're up shit creek, and it just, I don't know. It's still like, surprising me. Like as a kid hearing swear words like that when you're, 5-10 years old, you're like, oh yeah. Like, so, and like, I still feel that joy of when I first heard it as a kid. And that's the beauty of movies and the joy of cinema, of just like it bringing back those memories of childhood and youth watching a movie that you saw so long ago.
Yeah, definitely. Like one of the other funny parts or funny things about this movie is like, if you took the swear words out, this movie could probably be G.
Oh yeah.
Like there's nothing like particularly offensive about this movie except for the profanity. And like there really isn't even that much of it. Which is kind of funny, but
it's not violent. It's not, obviously there's, Carrie Fisher shooting machine guns and stuff. And, I think the Nazi part maybe would go for the G rating, but and Illinois Nazis. So
that's that is one of the things that's like kind of unfortunate now, is that the big joke about that has kind of been like lost to history. Like the story behind that is that in sometime in the late 70s, the Nazi Party tried to march in Skokie, Illinois, which is one of the largest Jewish communities in the world outside of like Israel. And the city sued them or denied them a permit, and the Nazi Party sued Skokie, and they actually won their Supreme Court case, or not the Supreme Court, but the Illinois court, saying that they had a right to free speech. And they did the march, and like, everybody was pissed about it. But like the ACLU actually went and defended the Nazi Party, which is an interesting fun fact. But anyway, so the movie's just making fun of that.
Yeah, and I like that.
In the movie, the leader of the Nazi Party calls them the American Socialist White People's Party, which is ASWPP, which is short for asswipe. So they snuck a little joke in there too. So it's pretty great.
Yeah.
And then they almost get run over by a car. So
yeah, I love that. I love that they like literally just like, you know, the Blues Brothers just like piss off everyone, and it just everyone just goes after them. You know, it's like the Illinois Nazis, the police, of course, and you know the country. What's the good old boys? The good old boys. He pisses them off. I love that. Like that one guy, the lead singer, he's just like, "Yeah, how's it? How, you know, how are you gonna be able to talk with no fucking teeth?" So good. Oh yeah. They just piss off everyone, and then just like that leads to chaos, and that adds to comedy, and like it, like the chase scene, like through Chicago, is awesome, and it's shot so well. It reminds me of the French Connection from the '70s, just the camera mounted on the hood, hauling ass, underneath an elevated train. Obviously, French Connection's in New York. This is in Chicago, but still, definitely, in my opinion, paid homage to that. And I thought that was super cool. But like that movie made me want to get, a cop car as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, just as funny as that sounds, like it just hauling ass through there. Like apparently they're going like 110 miles an hour through a lot of these streets. And like, it also is cool because it's kind of this whole movie's a love letter to Chicago, and like all the locations, they just, hit Lower Wacker Drive. Like they, all these awesome spots. Where else? There's a whole like Wrigley Field, him putting his address as 1060 West Addison. Them going past McCormick Place, which is a huge convention center in Chicago. Literally just the 90 West Highway. Just all that was just super, super cool. And
the Daily Plaza, which they completely destroyed.
Yeah. I love all that. Just, it makes me proud to be from Chicago, and it's cool. I don't know.
Yeah, it is fun. Especially if you grew up here and you're like, oh, I know where that is. I used to go to that place or whatever, it adds like a little bit of extra fun to watching it.
Agreed. That's the whole Dan Aykroyd's accent in the movie made me laugh because it's very Canadian, but also trying to kind of be Chicago. Yeah, and just that in and of itself was great.
It's very Da Bears.
Yes. I think going back to the sunglasses, it boosted the popularity of Wayfarer sunglasses by Ray-Ban. I thought that's cool. That became, those are timeless glasses, but they became very synonymous with the 80s from this movie, and then Risky Business, which we will be doing a podcast on that as well. I just think that's really cool.
Those are originally, I think, debuted in the 60s and then rapidly fell off. Because I think actually Bob Dylan wore them a lot. And then just like, went away like most trends do. But yeah, in the 80s they came back like with a vengeance and have kind of just stuck around forever. Because
they're great. I have a pair for sure. When I was younger, I mean, again, I was obsessed with this movie. I loved this movie. I wanted to dress up as a Blues Brother. Unfortunately, I didn't have anyone to dress up with, but no, that I like, had pasted on sideburns and like the glasses and the hat, and it was just a classic. It's a cult classic, and like I think it's one of the movies John Landis is for sure known for the most, and like it just a lot of people in pop culture know this movie.
Yeah. I think this is like one of the most iconic cult classics. Like we said in the beginning of the episode, like it's still kind of mind-boggling that everyone hasn't seen this movie.
I know.
Because it's just so like everything about it is just so like legendary and iconic.
It's so iconic.
you just kind of expect everybody to have seen it.
I know. It's definitely mind blowing. So definitely highly reviewed, highly rated, worth a watch if you haven't seen it. Otherwise, just a rewatch if you haven't watched it in a while, like me.
Yeah.
It's definitely a loved movie, and even if you're not from Chicago, it's still a classic. So
yeah. All right.
All right. I think we're good. Thanks for listening.
Yep. See you next time.
See you guys.